Welcome. I'm Dr. Karen Philbrick, Executive Director of the Mineta Transportation Institute at San Jose State University. Today, we're joined by Carl Guardino, Executive Vice President for Government Affairs and Policy at Bloom Energy. Carl, we are so grateful that you've joined us today to share with us your best practices and lessons learned for leading a diverse and inclusive team. Thank you. Carl, tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into transportation.
My background in transportation comes from a deep belief that transportation, as well as housing, impacts all of us. And it impacts not only us as individuals and our quality of life, but also the economy of our region, state, and nation. And to have just an immediate positive way to impact the lives and livelihoods of people throughout our region and our state, transportation has just always been a passion.
Now, Carl, you're known as a consensus builder. You've led multiple successful campaigns. Tell me, in working with all these different personalities, how do you build collaboration?
I learned early on in my career that it is always wiser and more productive to build bridges rather than to burn them down. And to do that, there are some rules that I just try to live by. One, treat people with respect and value. Two, even when you can't agree with people, you can do it in a way that's civil. Three, never surprise people. If you're going to be on the opposite end of an issue, have the courtesy and grace to let them know in advance so that you reserve the right to work together in the future. And then four, seek common ground. I developed, when I was CEO of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group for nearly 24 years, what I called the 95-5 philosophy. And that's my firm belief when it comes to issues like transportation and housing, that we agree about 95% on the solutions. And we may fundamentally disagree about 5%. The problem is, all too often, we get wrapped up in the 5% where we'll never find common ground, that we forget the 95% in which we could be working productively together. I say set aside the 5%. Focus on the 95% where we can be building communities, building bridges, and building a better quality of life for all of us.
What are your thoughts on leadership during this divisive time that we're experiencing in America?
What an opportunity we're living in such a divisive time in America, to be role models and examples. We live in the United States, not the divided states. And when others are not acting in ways that reflect our better nature, it is almost easier for me to try to draw a contrast, to treat people civilly, to remember that I cannot control the actions and the attitudes of others, but I am responsible for the actions and attitudes of myself, my team, my organization, and my family. And if we reflect on that, if we're grounded every day in trying to engage in civil discourse, we can accomplish that goal. Now, also in my faith tradition, it's important to me to treat others with value and respect. And I try to do that daily by being grounded so that when I set off for my day, I have that grounding, that foundation built, that no matter what comes my way, I cannot be responsible for the incoming, but I can truly be responsible for the outgoing of what comes out of me. My advice for people as we go through the COVID-19 challenge, the economic downturn that has resulted, a time of great unrest, and I believe incivility as a country that's permeated into our communities, is a few. First, I never use the word crisis. I use the word challenge, and it is intentional. People panic in a crisis. People rise up to meet a challenge. So words matter. We are in challenging times. Second, remember, we are in a challenge. We are in a global pandemic. We are not going to stay in a global pandemic. There's a great psalm by King David that talks about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. You're walking through it. You're not camping out there. Winston Churchill once said that when you find yourself in hell, keep going. We will get through this crisis. If there's anything we know from pandemics throughout history, they have a starting point and they have an ending point. This will end. As hard as today might be, this week, this month, this year might be, please remember, we will get through it, and we do it best when we do it together.
How do you ensure that you have diversity with the people you work with, that you're expressing values of inclusivity as you lead?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion cannot just be an expression. It has to be a way of life and leadership. Here's my example. When I had the pleasure of working at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, I would annually go away for a vision retreat, holed up alone in a cabin in the mountains in the Sierras for 3 to 4 nights and days by myself, visioning about the future of the organization. And it was 4 years ago when I realized even an organization that was nearly 40 years old, we had never taken the time to craft core values as part of our organization. That weekend, I reflected on what I felt as CEO were our core values, and I wrote down 7 of them. I came down the mountain, back to my team, said that I had in this envelope the 7 core values that I think reflect the leadership group, and that my team would never see what I wrote, because I did not want to hand down the core values. I wanted them built from our foundation up. So I said, here are my 7. You will never see them. I'd like you to invest in a process where you develop what you think our core values should be. My team came back to me 6 months later with what they felt should be the Silicon Valley Leadership Group's core values. They presented them to me. They were the same 7 core values that I had written down, yet not shared with them 6 months earlier. It was an incredible goosebump moment because we had built a culture where we all came together for the collective good. And one of those 7 core values is that we will not leave diversity, equity, and inclusion to chance. It is diversity by design. It is inclusivity by design. It's how we treat others from the very beginning of the hiring process, the words that we use in job descriptions, the pools into which we cast our nets to have diverse pools of candidates, the process by which we conduct inclusive team and individual interviews, build diversity by design. And by doing it in a thoughtful way, the result was a team that was diverse by gender, by ethnicity, by age, by political philosophy and ideology. Diversity in all of its forms is what permeates the leadership group. Again, not that we ever had to say, we're going to hire a diverse candidate, but by the way we designed the process, it brought forward diverse candidates qualified from which to choose.